I'm Andrew Goodman. I'm a senior product manager at Fifth Third Bank on the payables side. I specifically manage one of our managed payables products called Expert AP, but there's many on offer at the bank. And I've been at Fifth Third for going on 5 years now. My career was largely in the consumer space. I was at American Express, and then took a break from business school and went to Citigroup for 5 years. And then since then have sort of made that crossover to the commercial space and really focused on the payable side of the house. So whole career in payments, but really have enjoyed the time understanding more about clients such as you all in this room. So I've had a lot of the payments business side of the experience. Susan, however, has had both sides of the coin. So let her do an introduction for herself as well.
So good morning. I'm Susan West. I am also a senior product manager at Fifth Third. I focus on the receivables side of the house. So I want to get you all your money in, not send your money out. So as Andrew mentioned, my background is probably not your typical banker background. I actually spent 17 years as a practitioner. I started as an accountant, kind of worked my way through lots of different roles. I worked for one of Fifth Third's largest clients. So I'm one of those odd people, like I started at a client and I came to the bank. I feel like usually people start at the bank and go to a client. I like to think that gives me a lot of different perspective to kind of add to our Fifth Third product family. I'm very excited to be here today to learn about you guys and talk to you about automation. I'm very passionate about this. In my past, I spent a lot of years as a Six Sigma black belt. I guess you always are a Six Sigma black belt. So that whole concept of optimization and process improvement and doing more with little resources and things like that, that's a lot of what I did as a practitioner. So now I love to not just get to work with one client, like the company I worked for, but I'm getting to work with hundreds and hundreds of clients and really being able to see that optimization happen. And it's so rewarding to see just the value that can be realized with some of these automations. So really happy to be here today.
We go to Susan all the time. We're like, how would a customer feel about this? Like, what's your perspective? So no, we love Susan's input on the team. So today, it's meant to be a very informal, free-flowing conversation. We'll start out on the payable side and focus there a bit, but it'll all intertwine, as we all know, those that are working in the automation, AP automation space, receivables automation, it all intertwines together. So we'll make sure to thread that needle. Also, at any point, if you feel questions come up or you're seeing something up on the slide and you're thinking, that's great, it sounds convincing, but here's the reality. Like, we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to understand how this could actually really turn into a value-added conversation for you. So to start out with payables. So just to get to know the room a little bit better, when it comes to your accounts payable processes internally within your various organizations, how many of you would say you're 100% fully automated with no manual tasks whatsoever? It just runs itself. Okay, not shocking. That's what I largely expected. What about largely, like a good portion's automated, but you still have a few manual tasks lingering here and there? Anyone fall into that category? No, this is trending with what we see largely. How about there's some automation, some pieces are there, but really a lot of the work has to happen manually. Who fits in that category? Okay, that's, yep, overwhelming majority. And who here is just absolutely at the service of paper at all times? You got to stamp, you got to sign, papers on the desk, you have to come into the office. Who has to really just cater their lives around a paper-based process? Anyone like that here? Okay, so a very large overwhelming majority in the partially automated category. So just to give a little glimpse of how this compares with a survey conducted by one of our fintech partners, AvidXchange, and also the Institute of Financial Management a couple years back. Partially automated is indeed the vast majority of what we find across the market. It's a lot of people know that automation is necessary. They know it's a good thing. They're not quite sure how to approach it. What is step one? How do I become more efficient? Who do I even ask? How does this become a value-added component of my business at the end of the day? So just in case there was any doubt, you're in good company. Even some of the largest corporations in the country, even when I was at Citigroup, I remember being shocked at the amount of paper checks that we would send millions of dollars to other very reputable organizations, and it had to go in the mail. And there was not really a good reason to explain why, except for that's just always how it's been, right? And I feel like that's a story that we hear a lot. So to give a little bit more color around some of the broader trends that we saw in the same survey, only 25% of AP departments within the companies that were surveyed say that their invoice specific processes are highly automated, as we're kind of scoping it out to be purchase to invoice to pay in terms of the payables process for a lot of these folks. 69% of controllers said that improved financial visibility, understanding what's the status of my payment, what's the reporting look like, how can I have good auditable information, that was a top priority for them, something that they didn't have today as well, largely a gap in many of their processes. 63% of organizations still make more than half their payments by paper check. Does that resonate? How many of you all think probably more than half of your payments are made by a paper check? Is that roughly? Okay, so pretty much something we see a lot there as well. And almost 80% of organizations experience some sort of fraud. This tends to be the hot button issue. Anyone who here has experienced fraud in the last 12 months in some form or another? Okay, so that alone provides a huge argument.
Just out of curiosity,
Has anyone not? Should we try it? Who's not experienced fraud in the last 12 months? Okay. We'll take it. I was going to say, and we'll also probably right. We'll ask you some questions later as to what you're doing right, because it's a very common problem, and oftentimes it can go undetected for a long time. By the time it's discovered, it's a lot to manage, and at the end of the day, beyond losing money, it's inefficient, right? There's investigation, there's time that has to go in, there's management between banks. Any number of things could lead to what should be a very standardized process becoming a total nightmare. So security, reliability, reporting, those are themes that we largely see within the payable space's needs. So to summarize these points, right? Fraud risk, lack of visibility, that tends to be a hot button issue. Inaccurate and error prone. When you have, the more manual you are, the more chances there are that someone's going to write something down wrong, key something in wrong, whether for an invoice or a check or whatever that might be. And at the end of the day, because it's manual, it's cumbersome. You're spending time using very talented resources on your team, writing checks, sending them out the door, processing payments, versus helping them to be a more strategic partner at the table in the broader finance organization. And that's something where we often find, especially jumping ahead a little bit, when we talk about automating your payables and increasing efficiency, a lot of folks' mind go to, well, does that only mean I'm going to be reducing my headcount at the end of the day? And sure, that's an option, but we often recommend, instead of doing that, redeploying your resources in a more work smarter, not harder fashion, right? Because when you have those resources deployed towards more strategic thinking, you're able to show them and prove value in other ways for the resources that you're allowed to be working with on your team already today. So there's a lot, we can get into that a little bit later as well, but the bottom line is, when some of your most talented folks in your organization are just stuck with data entry and similar activities, there's definitely an underutilization of resource problem that often needs to be addressed. So here, I'll go through this, then we'll pause for questions or comments, because this is sort of we've heard about all the problems, we get it. How should we think about solving it, right? What's the so what in this whole story that we're trying to tell? When it comes to accelerating invoice processing, we see the pain points, right? Manual steps, processing slowly, missing SLAs, getting a lot of things out late. How do you solve that? Digitization and automation. There are so many tools out there in the marketplace that can digitize and automatically, optically scan or do things that can be accomplished in a much faster fashion than someone finding an invoice, looking line by line, having to transfer data over, and making it just a much more cumbersome process. That is something that a lot of tools these days, it's been a huge focus. Invoice management itself, because if you have the front end taken care of, then the back end, not that it takes care of itself, but it's a lot easier to manage, right? When by that time it gets to the payment part, the upfront is providing the confidence that's needed to then execute accordingly. Automating and streamlining. This is where there's a little bit sort of the hero portion comes in for the AP team. If you can electronify your payments, a lot of these pain points, we see slow approvals, we see sometimes just costly processing and expenses. Some of the easiest ways to say, here's how we could add immediate value is if you could switch some of these payments over to an electronic format, whether it's an ACH, whether it's a card. Not only are you increasing security and visibility and speed of your payments, but often the gravy on top is you are having a little bit of a reward, rebate share, revenue share. A lot of you may experience that if you have a company card program or some sort of premium ACH program where a portion of that interchange, we call it, comes back to the business in the form of a reward, just as an incentive for paying out in that format. Now, I will add on to there. Sometimes that becomes more to manage when you have to decide who gets paid by a card, who gets paid by an ACH, who gets paid by a check. But at the end of the day, if you look at the holistic picture, the electronic payment management ends up being much more time effective and much more cost effective. And at the end of the day, the hot topic that a lot of folks are talking about in the industry, just good old security, right? Even beyond fraud prevention, understanding where your payments are at, what is the status? Is it late? Is it on time? Is it still processing? And also at the end of the day, 6 months down the road, if, or I should say, when an audit comes, because we know that they come, being ready and having easily trackable information to say, yes, we have records from this time period, here you go. It becomes less of a fire drill and much more of an easy pull to say, here's what we did during this time period. And what can enable all that is really that any sort of solution that you would use when you're automating needs to have that maximization of visibility and control. Whatever it is, it should be searchable, it should be retrievable, and at the end of the day, it should be electronic so that you could have an easy way to reference whatever it is you might need at that time. So this is how we think about, here's the pain points, here's how we solve it in principle. Obviously, the actual tactical steps to get there can be a bit more of an involved story, but I'll just take a quick pause for a second. As you see some of these, especially in the how we solve, does it bring any questions to mind, or have any of you perhaps tried something like this before and either had a success at it or a failure at it? Because we talk about this all day long and we can talk about it in principle, but we love hearing from folks out in the real world who can tell us, this works in theory, but sometimes there's other challenges associated with it as well. Yes.
I have a question, and it's tied to payroll.
Yes.
So we upload our payroll, and it is dated for Friday. But what we've learned is the receiving entity can disperse it at their leisure, even though I've stated it's Friday.
Mm-hmm.
So now we have the challenge of employees receiving their pay before they should be receiving their pay. And that has become a real issue for us. What's the way around it?
There are some, and I don't know, Susan, if you have perspectives on receivables or how that could possibly tie in, but I know on the payable side, there are certain controls in place depending on the program you use or the solution you use. There are ways that you can sometimes set instruction to have things deployed a certain time. That's sometimes easier said than done. And especially depending on the nature of your payroll process, it could be, sometimes it has to be managed in-house. Other times, if it's more of a managed automated solution, they should have a control in there that can say, here's the time at which I would like this specific payment group to deploy to recipients. So that's at least my perspective on the payable side. I don't know if there's any further receivables insights there, but that's why it's important when looking for an automation solution. They're not, I'll just say in general for payables and receivables, not all managed automation solutions are created equal, right? So those types of questions are very important and very valuable to ask upfront of your banker or the fintech you're working with or whatever organization, so that as you're exploring your pain points, they can address each one of those specifically. If you go out to bill.com or any number of websites, a lot of folks are going to tell you we can do it all. That's a very nice thing to say to get you in the door, but 99% of the time that's not true, right? They can do a lot, but can those tasks specifically that they are trying to address meet your specific needs? Because for some organizations, payroll is front and center. For others, it's trying to get early pay discounts and making the procurement team happy, right? There's different objectives and primary mission statements that you're trying to achieve, and that will directly drive, at the end of the day, who's going to be able to best suit your needs in looking for an automation solution. Yes.
My experience with that is payroll company has no say over it. And I'm going to call out a bank. Key Bank is doing that. So our employees at Bank at Key Bank are seeing their funds pending on Wednesday night, but the people that bank at ABC Bank don't, because it caused heated discussion in the office that I was paying you first, but not you. And it was like, I have nothing to do with this,
So there are, Fifth Third has a similar service that your employees could sign up for, where they can get paid 2 days, a Wednesday before a Friday day. Now the bank's taking the risk in that case, not you, but most regional banks have that service available to consumers today. So I don't know if that's the same issue.
Oh,
here.
oh, yeah,
Yeah.
this has been going on for several years.
Is it to all
Well, it
financial
started
institutions,
out
or-
with, the department store, whatever, big store that allowed it their people bank using their bank.
Yeah,
And then it started with the banks because they had to compete.
Yeah.
So I think everyone now gets theirs before it's even the payday. And I have worked with multiple banks, so it's not just, having a bank issue. I get really frustrated because then my clients have then say, hey, they're not coming in. And I go, get the money early. And my hands
she
are
runs a
tied.
staffing company, right?
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. So different, yeah, different needs and the fact that
But
it's
even
happening.
my
both ways.
internal staff, they get it early.
Interesting.
So
So
I think like to Alex's point, the bank is
Oh, yeah.
taking the risk.
Yeah,
Because if the money's
Oh,
not
yeah.
there.
yeah,
and
But
there's a
some
withdrawal.
banks do it and some banks don't, so it's out of our hands.
So
what
they have our
the
hands.
Individual banks do.
Yeah, and we've had employees that have said, hey, our money's not there yet. We said, today's Friday.
I know.
Mhm.
But we keep getting it on Thursday.
That's exactly what happened when the expectation came on. Then they
Check the
ran it
handbook,
out.
it's Friday. Don't get mad.
There you go. Policy.
see this real world application right here. And it does depend, as we've been saying, it does depend on the bank, the risks being taken. But yeah, these types of detailed discussions are very important with your financial institution to help ensure that efficiency, not just efficiency, but also the control of the process, right? So great. Any other thoughts just as there's different components obviously to this, and there's different pain points each of you may be experiencing, such as payroll, but ideally the same principles would apply, but once again, it will depend on whether it's your financial institution or the solution provider in general that you're working with to help focus on those pain points and solve for them. Okay. So the last couple of slides it sort of illustrates how we like to think of the problem-solving elements of accounts payable automation. We always sometimes are getting caught up in the mindset of, I just need to do this faster. I need to do this specific task, get it done quicker, cheaper. And that's great. In many cases, AP teams are more thought of as cost centers than not. But thinking about it as a strategic part of the organization, we like to embody these principles called jobs to be done. So on the payable side, there's this sort of breakout of not only the jobs to be done, but who specifically would be conducting each of these activities, right? Who needs to source goods and services? That's more the procurement side. Someone needs to receive them. Someone needs to manage the open payables, then pay the open payables, then eventually close and manage those payables. There are various sort of stages throughout the life cycle that might have certain focus for different members of the team, and helping to really break down in a sort of digestible way to say at the end of the day, well, where we're struggling is paying my open payables, or really we don't have a handle on escheatment or dispute management, right? Knowing where some of that can be narrowed down and what job that's making harder for you to do can also help really drive that organizational search and research as you look to find an automation solution. So, and I believe we're providing these slides out for later, and so we'll make sure that these are something that you can reference as needed. Along with jobs to be done, there's also the personas, the folks that are doing the job. We got a little kitschy with some of the acronyms here, but you've got at the top levels, right? Finance, Francis, the CFO level, their whole, well, there's a lot of objectives at that level, but one of them is cost reduction, ensuring that mitigating risk mitigation and fraud prevention is top of mind, right? Purchasing function, always trying to make sure that the cost savings are being realized to the best of their ability. Payments, Paul, accounts payable, Adam, more the AP side of the house, really focusing on streamlining that whole payments process from purchase order to invoice to pay, whatever that piece may mean. Different members of your team are going to have various levels of interest in solving their problems. So getting to know each of these members of the organization and where their pain points are, and then tying them back to the jobs to be done that might be more difficult to accomplish because of those pain points, that will help really fuel the correct search, a thoughtful search of how can we make this better. At the end of the day, when this collaborative effort is accomplished and achieved in a great way, we see the AP teams that often work with us at least become less of purely a cost and efficiency center and more of a strategic partner, as we mentioned earlier. they're saving time doing data entry and sending checks out of the mail, and instead are using that time to say, we've had some time to look at analytics, trends, reporting, visibility. We know who our troublemaker vendors are. We know who's taking 4 months to cash a check. We know who's really impacting our efficiency. We know who we need to call. We know who we need to work with in sourcing to make sure that we have a little bit more connectivity. Once you're able to have the time and the energy and the resources to focus on how do we optimize that piece of the puzzle, then often the AP team is thought of as much more of just as much of a seat at the table as other strategic parts of the organization within finance, because then they're truly contributing to the problem solving element versus just the efficiency piece of things. So it's a holistic way of approaching any automation strategy. It should not, automation's goal should not be just to get things done faster. That should be a given. And whoever you use to accomplish that, they should do it well as be secure and reliable. But at the end of the day, it should also enable your teams and your organizations throughout your various companies to be able to sit at the table and say, here's how we could truly problem solve, drive up revenue, reduce costs, and be just as much of a partner as any business team or any other revenue generation team in your organization. So any other questions on the payable side before I hand it off to our receivables expert? Okay. And as they come to mind, a lot of this will tie together. So feel free to harken back to it as we continue.
All right. So who likes to collect money? Who likes to get paid? All right.
I like to get paid early.
It might be too soon.
I know. Sorry.
All right. So how many of you could take a guess? How much do you think it costs you, or on average, a company, if you get a payment and you don't know how to post it, like per payment exception? Anybody have any ideas? Anybody done any research or calculations within your own company with how much it might cost you? So I find this like really shocking, but our most recent research is $7.40 per payment exception. Let's think about that. Let's say you get a payment in and it's a check only, has no remittance whatsoever, maybe an ACH, and they didn't send you an email, they didn't send anything, and CCD Plus did nothing. Let's say they paid you on 4 different invoices. The research that your team has to do in order to figure out, where does that money go? That really adds up. And on average, it's like $7.40. And you can think of that per invoice on that payment, because each exception on a payment. So why is AR automation important? It's costing you a lot of money when you're getting those payments that are difficult to post. So if I think about, and I love that we're doing payables and receivables together today. I always like to, make it all in good fun, but kind of put it on the payables side of the team that I work in, all of the great work that's been done in payables automation. And really COVID was a huge catalyst for that. But it has created some additional challenges on the receivable side of the house. So, how many of you have gotten paid and you get an email, like log into this portal and get your remittance information? Do you really love the portals? Okay. So that could be, reason to do some AR automation. So, really that it's a dance between payables and receivables. Sometimes by optimizing in payables, you can sub-optimize in receivables. So what I like to think about when it comes to this is, how can we know we exist in the same ecosystem. How can we kind of ebb and flow together and realize optimization on both sides? It's funny, the manager that Andrew and I work for, he'll tell you he's historically been on the payable side. And I'm like, hey, have you thought about this? Hey, have you thought about this? And he's like, I get it. He's like, I get it. We can't just think about one side. We have to, it ebbs and flows, and we have to think about both sides. Because I always ask him, I'm like, so with your optimizing on the payable side, if you had to post that same payment on the receivable side, could you do it? And sometimes the answer is no. So, figuring out that dance and figuring out, I would, if the payables person could sit in the seat of a receivables person for a day, I think that maybe some of the processes would be different. So, I like to share some of these stats here. So I think the payables revolution and automation for payables, that's been happening. But now I feel like we're seeing an even more renewed focus on the receivable side of the house. So 67% of CFOs that were polled in a payments.com poll said that they were looking for some form of AR automation. And what I want to walk you through today is AR automation does not have to boil the ocean. You can do it in bits and pieces as you go on an AR automation journey. It doesn't have to be all at once. 27% say they definitely need some automation. So by a raise of hands, how many of you guys have any AR automation? All right. I love that not all your hands are raised. Because I hope to give you some good tidbits today of things that you can do. And my biggest message that I want you to take away is you don't have to boil the ocean. There's lots of little things that you can do that can help you to prepare to take on maybe something as big as a cash application system. But there's a lot of pieces of the overall AR cycle. So let's talk about the cycle. How many know the order to cash cycle? I'm a geek. I started out as an accountant. So the whole concept of order to cash. How many of you have customers? Probably everybody has customers, right? Because customers are who pay you. You guys are either providing a product, providing a service, and it doesn't stop there. Then really sometimes the real work begins because they have to pay you for that. But before you can get paid, you have to invoice them. How many of you love your invoicing process and it's super easy and it's a click of a button? That's amazing. Yes, I love that for you. Sometimes some of the biggest struggles can be just getting those invoices out the door. So I will lean on the company that I used to work for. They're very customer centric, which has served them very, very, very well. But in being so customer centric, they had some billing processes for some of their very large customers that maybe were serviced by hundreds of locations throughout the United States, where it would take them 2 weeks at the beginning of the month to put together a consolidated invoice in a very specific format in order to meet the expectations of that client. So those 2 weeks that they were taking to put together those invoices, that's 2 weeks they're not getting paid. But they either provided that product and paid for it, or they paid the labor for the people for the service that was provided, but now there's a significant delay. So what I like to talk about when I work with clients is this concept of the order to cash cycle. I want to take you through a holistic journey. I want to learn as much as I can about your whole cycle. And then I like to wear my black belt and look for, where are some opportunities? If you have, my favorite question to ask is, what are the things you know you need to do but you hate doing? Anybody have any tasks like that in your receivables process? Anybody have a spreadsheet that somebody keeps? It's like, oh, these are the problem payments that they come in. Oh, you're smiling, see? These spreadsheets, everybody has them. Now what happens, how many of you have a person that works in receivables at your company? And they're the ones that know all of the things. They know who pays when, they know who to call when someone hasn't paid. They know when to start worrying if somebody hasn't paid yet. What happens if that person retires? What happens if that person pursues another opportunity? That's really rough. How many people have a really easy time hiring people these days? Hiring is hard. And if you have an A player, someone who knows all of the things about your receivables and you lose them, you might have a spreadsheet you can fall back on, but maybe you don't know how to interpret the spreadsheet because everybody takes notes in different ways, right? So how do you hedge your bet? How do you protect yourselves? How do you overcome staffing challenges and things like that? Well, AR automation is one way that you can do that. What if I told you there were systems that could take all of the things? And one of the most talented AR people I ever worked with, she was in Columbus, Georgia. and her name was Amy Lynn. Is Amy Lynn. She knew everything about all those customers. Her AR percentage was incredibly low. She hardly had any unapplied cash. I wish I could clone her and put her in every single operation that we had at my old company. Because not everybody did it well. And AR is easy to maintain, but incredibly difficult to clean up if it gets out of control. It takes forever, right? But what if there was a system that as you get these payments in that are check only, they don't have any information with them, or you get bad remittance, or they give you numbers on their remittance that don't match a single thing in your system. It makes sense in their system, but you got nothing when you're trying to post it. There's software and stuff that's out there that you can take all of the things that are in Amy Lynn's head, and she can use those to do the initial research, but then the system's gonna remember. Oh, this customer number is associated with this bank account. And then the next time you get that challenging payment, could be an ACH, could be a check from that same payer, the system can say, hey, by the way, we know you posted this NICR to this customer account number last time. So do you still need the spreadsheet? Maybe, maybe not. Now you're able to kind of catalog that. And it's not that you want to, rip Amy Lynn, not at all. There's so many more value-added activities that she could be doing within accounts receivable. How many of you guys have unapplied cash or whatever you call it? Stuff that you get in, you don't know where to post it. I love it if you don't have any. But the company I used to work for, we were trying to keep total unapplied under 2% of total AR. That was a struggle sometimes. That was a really big struggle. And just because you get paid, does that help you? You've got cash flow, you've got money in the door, but what about your balance sheet? Are you able to close out that specific invoice? Are you still accruing that debt expense on it if you can't close it out? Yeah, that's like direct P&L impact. I remember when one of my Fifth Third bankers came to us at my old company, and it was a couple of years ago. It was, hey, we've got this new thing, it's real-time payments. They're like, oh, this is really going to take off. We want you to sign up for these real-time payments. And I remember looking at them and saying, well, what kind of remittance comes with this real-time payment? Is it just going to be like an instantaneous ACH that doesn't have any remittance? Because I don't want faster unapplied cash. I need remittance information that's going to be meaningful that I can actually use to close out my receivables. That's when I'm going to get a reduction in my DSO. That's when I'm going to stop accruing that debt expense. So that remittance information is almost more important in some cases than the actual payment, because you're not getting the impact of getting paid if you don't have the way to close it out in your system. So that's probably the biggest piece that I think of when I think of AR automation, is that job's to be done. That concept of closing out or reconciling the payment to your open receivable. But there's other pieces of this cycle. We talked about invoicing. If you're looking to, just get started with AR automation, what I would strongly recommend that you do is build a basic process map. Well, once you service your customer or provide a product to your customer, what do you do next? Who's involved? How many people? How long does it take you to do? And do that through your entire cycle. And then take a step back and look at it. Where do you feel like you spent the most time? Do you feel good about the amount of time that it took you to do each of those tasks? And then focus on the one that either took you the longest, you had the least amount of satisfaction with the way that it was done, and how can you optimize that? And some of these things that you can do, it doesn't take a huge IT resource. Because does anybody have unlimited IT resources? If anyone raises their hand, I want to talk to you because I want your IT resources. Maybe we can share them or something. So some clients that we've worked with that have really had a problem with invoicing, ERPs can really help with that. If there's a way to standardize your invoicing process. How many people send any of their invoicing out in a digital format, whether it be email or texting, or does everybody send it by regular mail? You have a lot of electronic. Yours doesn't take care of that. That's your automation in and of itself, right? You don't have to wait for the mail to get delivered. You depending on how you're sending it, you might even be able to tell if they've opened up the email. Do you have a way to send automatic reminders? Like, hey, you got a payment that's due in like 10 days. Or, hey, we saw you didn't pay us, and it was due yesterday. That's another way. And there's different communication platforms that can help with things like that. But the black belt in me loves the process map, loves kind of laying it out, and just look for your low hanging fruit. Where can you get a significant bang for your buck? And then work up to those more complex processes or things that are going to take more money. So let's talk about some of the common challenges. Anybody want to share what your biggest pain point in your receivables process is? If you don't want to share, that's totally fine. How many people get paid on time all the time and never have past their AR? Oh, so you laugh. See, like the struggle is real, right? The company I used to work for on the payable side, we had our own terms, and if we had an invoice that was a May invoice, we would pay you on June 25th. And too bad, if you wanted to get paid any sooner. You had to have a policy exception to get more accelerated terms. So a lot of times you're at the mercy of, especially the bigger your client is or your payer is, they're not going to be as open to suggestion to get a more favorable term. So you know that you're working within that, but then how can you optimize within that? Kind of redeploy your resources. Don't try to collect on the person who you know is not going to pay you until the 25th of the following month, the date of their invoice. Focus on the folks that you know are going to be open to paying you sooner and stuff like that. There are systems that are out there that can help you track payment trends, behavior, things like that, that can help you in your AR journey to really just use the best with the resources that you've got. Because I doubt anybody just has an abundance of staff that has a whole bunch of open time that you're trying to figure out what they're going to do for you this afternoon. Everybody is probably wearing a lot of hats and doing a lot of tasks. So they are probably very, very, very busy. How many of you get paid by check? How about ACH? How about wires? Real-time payments? Oh, nice. What about like Apple Pay, Google Pay, some of those electronic wallets, things like that? So one of the big themes in AR automation is, you have to provide all this choice. And you have to give them all these different ways to pay you, which sounds great in theory, but then at the same time, you have to be able to manage all of those channels and get all of that information. Again, it's not just enough to get paid. You have to get paid with the remittance information in a meaningful way that you can take that information and close it in your system. And then you get the benefit in your DSO, and then you get the benefit in your bad debt expense, things like that. So work with your banker to understand there's lots of options that are out there, but then also think about your processes and what you're doing within your company to make sure that you're not sub-optimizing yourself by opening yourselves up to a whole bunch of different kinds of payments. With the concept of real-time payments, there's a new emerging, this is like, banking isn't necessarily always considered revolutionary, but the fact that we have 2 new payment rails with real-time payments through the clearinghouse and FedNow through the Fed, that's like revolutionary. That doesn't happen very often. And some of the stuff that's coming with that is really exciting. And on the receivables front, the concept is called request for payment. So what that is, that's leveraging those faster payment rails. So think FedNow, think real-time payment. And you're actually able to send out an electronic invoice. This invoice will go into the consumer bank portal. So I get my, I'll use my water bill as an example. Up until a year ago, my water bill consisted of a white postcard that was like this big with red writing, and I couldn't pay online. I hate that. So the way that I could make it digital, I went into my banking app, I set it up as a vendor, And then I can go in, once I get that paper card, and then I can enter in the amount that's on my postcard. Now I actually did it in an envelope. But I can open that up, and I can make a payment based on what comes to me. In a real-time payment, the consumer is still using, or request for payment, I should say. The consumer is still using their consumer app, but you're able to send them an invoice that they can open up and view in the bank app. So now they don't have to get that separate, either postcard or water bill in the mail. It's all coming into the app or the mobile, like not for electronic banking, like on the web. And then the consumer can decision it there and say, yes, I want to pay. And then it's like a wire, it's irrevocable, the money goes instantaneously and you get the money in your account. But the best part is, it's not just enough to get paid, right? You need that remittance information. A request for payment is a round trip. It goes out with the remittance information. When it's accepted and acknowledged for payment, it comes back with all the remittance information. So now you not only get paid quicker because it's a faster payment, but you also have the remittance information. Now, sometimes, depending upon what your client base is, maybe they have trouble managing their budgets. So they want to pay you, but they don't have the money. If you time it right and they get their request for payment from you at the same, like on Wednesday, maybe when their payroll hits when it's supposed to hit Friday, but they can respond to that, and the response can only be valid if there are funds available in the account. So now, from a consumer side, like if they're, not good at managing their money, but they know, ooh, I need to make sure I pay this bill like every month. If you send them a request for payment, the funds in their account, they can just go ahead and pay it. They don't have to reconcile or balance their checkbook because those funds come out immediately. They can see it as soon as it goes through in their mobile app. So just something to think about. Not all the new stuff is scary because again, I think there were a lot of folks that were saying, hey, it's not just enough to get paid. Let's make sure we get the remittance information. So that I think there's a really exciting use case in payroll for that, like real-time payment type scenario, because you can pay them faster. It's irrevocable. It's like the security of a wire, but it's like pennies on the dollar to be able to do it. So something to think about. What I already asked, nobody wanted to share what their biggest pain point was. So that's okay. So I want to spend a little time talking about posting that cash. Do most of you have just a single person when you get your payments in and they're responsible for posting? Do they spend a good bit of their day doing just that? No? Okay. So what are the other things they're working on?
Sending invoices out,
Okay.
sometimes chasing down the dollar amount that they're actually invoicing is correct.
Okay.
So,
Okay. So AR folks, they do a lot of tasks, but certainly reconciling and posting the funds that are coming in, that's a really big priority. But sometimes it can take so long that it doesn't leave enough time to do the rest of the things. If I think about what we alpha split the receivables responsibilities on the collection side at my old company. They were responsible not just for unapplied cash, but they were responsible for collection calls and things like that. So they had multiple lists that they were working every day. If we could save some time when they were posting to give them more time to follow up on the unapplied cash is like it's like the cardinal sin of receivables. You've got this money, it's just sitting there, but you don't know where it goes. And until you can post it somewhere, it's just sitting on your balance sheet. We never aged our unapplied cash at my old company, so you didn't get a benefit of it. Even if that unapplied cash sat there for 180 days, it was still current. So, obviously every AR policy is different, but having someone who has a lot more time to do things, it is certainly beneficial. How many of you really love your posting process for ACH payments? See, I see some laughing. So what's so hard about posting an ACH payment? Nothing? So you always get the money picture remittance for your ACH.
an email.
Okay, does the email come on the same day as you get your payment?
Yes, sometimes it comes early.
Okay.
If people are using QuickBooks, I get like 3 days notification that it will be there in 3 days.
Okay, awesome. How many people struggle with finding the right email for the right payment? Okay, and I think back to my old receivables days, you know, we start in the morning, we pull a report from the bank, and I want to see, here's all my inbound ACH. And then we go to the group email, and we would try to find the right email to go with the payment that came in. Now, the company that I work for, we invoice weekly. So there were 4 or sometimes 5, depending on what their delivery day was, of the same amount, probably, every single month. So were they paying a combination? And maybe they had 10 open invoices. They had 4 that they had, you know, left open for 6 months, and then they had the current ones. They didn't give me any remittance information, or maybe they gave me some, but they just gave me dollar amounts. Which one am I supposed to post? Is your accounts receivable policy that you post the oldest first? If so, great. If not, you're supposed to post to, you know, the intention of the customer, then that gets a little more dicey. You're probably having to pick up the phone and call them. So what if I told you there are systems that would give you the ability to see, here's all my payments on an ACH basis and a wire basis that came into the bank in a single screen, and then on the other side, here's all the emails. You can just match them up. Then the system will be smart enough to remember, hey, you got this email from this originating email domain, and it was associated with this customer number last month. And then going forward, you wouldn't have to match up the email to the payment as long as the amount that was being paid matched what was open in the system. It could theoretically straight through process. Would you save time just trying to find the emails that go with the payment? Would you be able to use that time to do, maybe resolve your unapplied cash or something that would be more value added for the receivables process in general? This isn't, like Andrew mentioned, it's not just about headcount reductions. Quite the contrary. That whole concept of redeploying your human capital and letting them work on more value-added activities that are going to really drive your bottom line, that's what you want. You've got talented people. You know, give them more job satisfaction by automating some of the mundane tasks. You know, I used to do an exercise with my team where it was like a quadrant. Or tell me the things you like to do and you're good at. Tell me the things you like to do and you're not good at, but you want to know more about. What are the things you hate to do and you're not good at? What are the things you hate to do but you're good at? And trying to find a balance in, you know, what they were working on so that they had satisfaction. Like, I want them to work on the things that they want to work on. I want them to stretch them and grow them. So I want them to work on some of those things that they're, you know, they're self-reporting that they're not necessarily great at. I want to try to eliminate as much as possible the things that they know they're good at and they hate they're at. We probably lean on them for those things because they're good at it. But if they hate doing it, then you run the risk of turnover and stuff like that. So we talked a little bit about overcoming challenges. You know, I want to, if you guys are willing to share, I'm not going to pressure you or anything like that. But are there any parts of your AR cycle that we haven't touched on today? And you're like, gosh, this is the worst part for me. So I'd love for you to bubble it up. Let's talk about it. Sometimes it's nice to know that everybody has the same problem. Yeah.
We're trying to collect payment via email, like a payment portal or something that, you know, you can be on the phone with a customer and just say, hey, I'm going to send this over, versus then trying to call them or just having it there. We're struggling with getting an API payment link or something to connect with our CRM.
Okay.
So other people do it or have been able to, because I get emails all the time that say, hey, pay me, and then I just click on it and I'm able to go to the QuickBooks or that. But we're also in a more regulated industry, so we're in smoking accessories and more so on the dispensary and cannabis side.
So there are certain portals, and depending upon the portal, a lot of them will be able to integrate with whatever, like Salesforce or whatever CRM that you're using. A lot of times what it'll be is like a patch out. So your customer service rep can be working in your customer service portal. As soon as they get to the point where they're saying, hey, we want to pay you now, you can do it with like IDR if you want, or you can do it with an actual portal where there can be like buttons in your portal that would effectively punch them out to a payment portal that it would be PCI compliant and HIPAA compliant, necessary, things like that. And then when it comes back in, it would just give you a, hey, the payment was processed successfully pop up on the screen, so that your CSR would know that that group was closed. I think there's a lot of advantage in doing something like that, because that the whole concept of PCI compliance, if you are accepting card, is huge. And you don't want to have any non-compliance when it comes to PCI, because the consequences can be so dire. So that there are absolutely solutions out there that can help you with something like that and integrate into your CRM. Most of those solutions also have a customer service aspect to it as well. So you can have a portal that you can direct people to directly from your website. So that the experience starts in your website. You can then can have them click a link in your website, like pay here or something like that, take you into a portal where again it's all PCI compliant. The payers are managing their own payments, they're coming in. You can make it so that you can present all of the invoices that they have open with you. And you can write the rules as such that they can only check the boxes and pay in full, so you don't have partial payments. But at a minimum, you'll at least have and here's the invoice number that they're paying, and here's the amount that they paid, even if you allow for a short pay. And then you can get that reporting back and upload it automatically into your system. But then also you can administer it on the CSR side too. So make it, self-service for the payers, but then also monitor it and manage it, accept payments on an administrative basis with a CSR. So. Anything else?
I have a question. Is it a best practice to have your AP and AR paying out of the same, receiving money in the same bank account?
I think that's pretty a matter of personal preference. Thinking about like as an accountant, I'd probably like them separate, just because then you can maybe automate your reconciliation process on the payable side, and then you can, if you're kind of on a building block journey and working towards maybe a cash application system, something like that, having your inbound ACH in a separate account will help you to basically streamline the payments that are going to come into an automated system. So structurally, it might, if you're thinking longer term, like keeping something segmented can be helpful. Just because then it's not, oh, well, we want all of this except for this, and this to go into maybe a cash application system. But we see it on all of this. So again, there's no right or wrong way.
Yeah.
Any more questions? Thank you guys for your attention. This was, I love doing things like this and coming out and meeting folks like you. So thank you for sharing your expertise and situational pain points and stuff like that. If you have any questions or anything after the fact, Andrew and I would be more than happy to facilitate any questions like through your bankers and TMOs and whatnot.
We love the one-on-one discussions. We love talking through very specific. Sometimes it's hard to bring these specific situations up in a group setting, right? So we gladly will walk through that with you. We have great teams of experts that can walk through pretty much every step of either payables or receivables. So happy to continue the discussion as you like.
Thank you. And on the note of